Are you sure you'll be okay without me coming along, Emily?
It's fine, really.
Can you handle the company interview on your own?
I know the place.
But
Today is the long-awaited day of the interview at my dream company. I wanted to head to the interview venue as soon as possible, but my mother, who came to see me off at the entrance, keeps asking for confirmation. Growing impatient with my mother's constant questioning, I said firmly, "I'm fine, I told you. We've been to this place so many times." Finally, my mother stopped asking.
that is right. We have been there together many times. You'll be fine on your own.
Yeah. I've always admired this place and decided that I would definitely work here. Seeing me saying this, my mother nods in agreement, tears welling up in her eyes.
It was worth raising you this far. I've given you a boost. Now it's up to you to seize the opportunity with your own abilities.
I looked at the suit I was wearing after hearing my mother's words. This suit has a special meaning to my mother, who wore it when she was younger. When my father passed away from illness when I was young, my mother made this suit herself. Having to support the family in my father's stead, my mother started job hunting with no money to spare. She even saved money on buying a suit for job hunting by sewing it herself from cheap materials. And in that suit, my mother worked tirelessly for me. I loved seeing my mother work in that suit. Wanting to be like my mother and repay her kindness, I had begged her to let me wear her suit. "Thanks for lending it to me. I feel like it's giving me strength."
You're exaggerating.
No, really. I'm not exaggerating. With a smile on her face, my mother grabs my shoulder and gives me a serious look.
To tell me, okay. Then I'll take care of them for you.
I rolled my eyes and chuckled at my mother's intense words. "Come on, it's time for you to let go." My mother is a real worrier. During my first experiences in middle school and high school, my mother always worried and gave me the same advice. "Anyway, I'm going now. You have a business trip today, right? Once I leave, you should get going too." Hearing this, my mother checks her watch as if she had forgotten about the trip.
Oh no? Look at the time. I haven't prepared anything. What am I going to do?
This isn't the time to panic. Get ready quickly.
Right. You should hurry up and go to Emily. Goodbye. Take care.
My mother rushes through the house, shouting and panicking. Despite being a successful career woman, my mother can be a bit of a scatterbrain, which is quite troublesome. I sighed as I watched my mother finally left the house, saying, "I'm off." Arriving safely at the company, I waited in front of the interview room.
Next person, please.
I heard through the door, and I checked my suit and took a deep breath. "Excuse me," I said, placing my hand on the doorknob and slowly pushing it open. There were two interviewers in the room. One was an older man. The other was a young woman. This woman was breathtakingly beautiful. She had striking features, and her hair, reaching down to her waist, was lustrous. Even the suit she was wearing seemed to shine. I couldn't help but think to myself, wow, she's incredibly beautiful. As I was thinking this, I heard a cold voice from the woman.
Are you going to come in or not?
"Well, yes." I reflexively replied and walked to the chair in front of the interviewers. Did I mishear? I thought I just heard a cold voice from this beautiful interviewer. No, it must have been a misunderstanding. This is an interview, after all. It's unthinkable that someone in the position of an interviewer would use such harsh words. As I was trying to convince myself of this, the beautiful interviewer opened her mouth.
Your name.
"Yes?"
I said, tell me your name.
It wasn't my imagination. The cold voice was indeed coming from the beautiful interviewer. Feeling overwhelmed by her cold voice, I hurriedly replied, "I'm Emily White. Thank you for giving me this opportunity today. I'm looking forward to working with you." As I energetically introduced myself, the male interviewer kindly gestured for me to sit down, saying, "Please, have a seat." I was relieved. This male interviewer seemed kind, unlike the beautiful interviewer. I said, "Excuse me," and took a seat. Then, the male interviewer began to speak with a smile.
I will be conducting the interview today. My name is Mr. Scott.
As Mr. Scott introduced himself, he glanced awkwardly at the beautiful interviewer. Noticing his gaze, she frowned slightly.
I am Parker.
It seems the beautiful interviewer's name is Ms. Parker. Feeling nervous, I greeted her, "Nice to meet you." Seeing my nervousness, Ms. Parker snorted and began to scrutinize me.
Do you know what kind of company this is, and still decided to come for the interview?
What? Caught off guard by her unexpected question, I momentarily froze, but quickly adapted. Yes. I understand that your company is one of the leading fashion companies in America. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that your company is the origin of most fashion trends in America. As I answered confidently, Miss Parker raised the corners of her mouth, laughing and saying, "That's right, that's right." Her mouth was smiling, but her eyes were not. Maybe, I think. Could it be that I was experiencing a stress interview? But when I looked at Mr. Scott, he seemed troubled but unable to say anything assertive to Miss Parker. Perhaps that's why. Miss Parker, with a mocking smile, seemed to have free rein in this interview.
How could you come dressed like that, knowing what kind of company this is?
What do you mean dressed like that?
That suit, what's with it?
She pointed at the suit I was wearing, and I looked down at it. Maybe there was some part of it that was disheveled. I double-checked, but everything seemed fine. Is there something wrong with it? Tentatively asking, Miss Parker suddenly burst out laughing.
Really? You don't know? Well, I'll tell you. First of all, that button design. What's up with that?
This is an original logo engraving.
How old-fashioned. And that white ribbon on your chest. You think it's cute?
This is part of the suit set. No matter how I answered, Miss Parker kept laughing at me, and I couldn't help but look down. Seeing me like this, Mr. Scott looked at Miss Parker with a troubled expression, thinking it must be unbearable.
Maybe you should stop.
Scott said with a trembling voice, but Miss Parker glared at him.
Don't you dare speak up when you're in a lower position than me.
What? Isn't Mr. Scott in a higher position? I thought, surprised, as Miss Parker turned his attention back to me. Then, she snorted with laughter.
Well, what I'm trying to say is,
she said, pausing dramatically and looking at me with a mocking gaze.
You look so old-fashioned and granny-ish.
After declaring that, Miss Parker laughed loudly.
Well, that granny-ish suit suits an ugly girl like you.
An old-fashioned and granny-ish look. Hearing those words, I thought to myself, I'm done for. Not because I thought I failed this interview. I lifted my face, took a deep breath. Then, I asked Miss Parker a question. Would you mind taking back what you said?
Take it back. Why? It's true.
I looked at Miss Parker, who was laughing, and sighed deeply with genuine disappointment. Mr. Scott, too, looked troubled, holding his head in his hands. Is that so? That's too bad. I thought you would know, since Mr. Scott knew. At my words, Miss Parker's eyebrows twitched. This suit is... I took a deep breath and then answered.
What is it?
It was tailored by your company's president, you know? Upon hearing that, Miss Parker showed a dumbfounded expression.
What?
She said, her face distorted for a while before becoming flustered.
What? What are you talking about?
She was clearly upset. As I wondered what to do next, I heard the door open behind me with a click. When I turned around, my mother was there. Mom! Why are you here? Weren't you on a business trip?
I canceled it because I didn't think I'd make it. So, I came to the office worried about you, and I was eavesdropping from the reception room next door.
My mother answered with a big smile, and I let out a huge sigh of disbelief. You shouldn't have. Wasn't it a meeting? And didn't I tell you not to follow me?
Well, the HR manager told me it was fine to listen in the reception room, and I left my work to Mr. Davis.
That's not the point. Don't abuse your authority. And don't just push everything onto Mr. Davis just because you're the vice president. He must be having a hard time.
Oh, he gladly accepted it. He said, leave it to me.
Ugh. I was at a loss for words and sighed heavily. Miss Parker, who was watching my mother and me, seemed unable to grasp the situation. On the other hand, Mr. Scott stood up and bowed deeply to my mother, saying, Thank you for your hard work, President Mitchell. Seeing Mr. Scott, my mother smiled and gave a light wave. Then, she turned to Miss Parker with a smile on her face. However, her eyes were not smiling.
Are you Miss Parker, by any chance?
My mother asked, and Miss Parker's face had turned pale as if she were a different person from before.
What did you say about the suit my daughter is wearing?
I didn't realize she was your daughter. I didn't notice because Parker is a common last name.
Miss Parker said, clearly trying to avoid answering the question. My mother persisted.
Answer the question. What did you say about the suit my daughter is wearing?
Finally, after being asked twice, Miss Parker replied in a barely audible voice, her head down.
I said it felt outdated and old-fashioned.
Satisfied with the answer, my mother nodded with a smile.
It seems you don't know, so let me, the founder and president of this company, explain about this suit. This suit is now part of a popular brand series.
Upon hearing the explanation, Miss Parker's head shot up.
Yes, Miss Parker. The one you're wearing now. It's strange, isn't it? Any of our employees should be able to recognize my daughter's suit at a glance.
Indeed, just as my mother said. Mr. Scott, an employee, knew. He knew what the suit I was wearing was.
This suit was designed entirely by me. The buttons with the original logo imprint are the predecessor to our company's logo. And the white ribbon worn with the suit became a trendsetter at the time. Not knowing such company history. It seems you may have a beautiful face, but you're not quite right for our company.
Please wait, I didn't know. So, please, can you forgive me?
Ignorance is no excuse in society. To avoid that, it's common sense to always study as a working adult. But I'm not that cruel, so I'll forgive you if you study properly, since you didn't know.
Upon hearing my mother's words, Miss Parker's face lit up.
Thank you so much.
However, her joy was short-lived.
But that's only if the suit was the only thing you insulted.
What?
Didn't you insult more than just the suit?
At my mother's words, Miss Parker's face turned pale again, as if she had remembered something. Mom? Maybe that's enough. I tried to stop her, but my mother's face was clearly angry. From my experience, there was no stopping her now.
You called my daughter ugly, didn't you? How do you plan to explain that?
Well, that is.
Seeing Miss Parker unable to make excuses and turning pale in front of the president, I couldn't help but feel sorry for her and tried to stop my mother. Mom. I don't mind. Besides, it's true that I'm ugly. But my mother shouted, that's not the point.
Miss Parker, you may not understand because you're young. But one's own child is the most precious and the most adorable in the world. It's because they're adorable that you can keep giving them unconditional love. No matter how difficult the circumstances were. I've always showered this child with love. Where is a parent who wouldn't be upset when their precious child is insulted?
Mom. That's right. Growing up without a father, my mother always took good care of me. She loved me. That's why she always said.
Got it? If someone bullies you, make sure to tell me, okay? Then I'll go and take care of them.
Now was that time. My mother was trying to take care of things for me. Tears welled up in my eyes as I thought of my mother's deep love. She gently asked Miss Parker.
Weren't you also raised like that, Miss Parker?
When she asked, Miss Parker seemed to remember his parents and looked surprised. Then, as if making up her mind, Miss Parker looked at me and slowly bowed her head.
I'm sorry.
Seeing Miss Parker like that, my mother let out a sigh of relief.
I'll forgive you with just a demotion and transfer. It's a decent treatment since it's a demotion and transfer from the head office.
Though the demotion and transfer were hard for Miss Parker, she answered, understood. In a downcast manner.
Your new location will be, let's see, your hometown, Miss Parker.
It must have been unexpected. In front of the president, Miss Parker showed a surprised face, saying,
What?
My mother chuckled and said to Miss Parker with a smile. This time, her eyes were also smiling, and it was a gentle smile.
Now go back to your hometown and take care of your parents.
The president's smile must have warmed Ms. Parker's heart. Finally, Ms. Parker showed a genuine smile.
Yes, thank you.
In the end, the interview that day was cancelled, and we decided to have another one later. When I had the second interview, I was successfully hired by my mother's company based on my abilities. Finally working at the company I had long admired, I asked my mother for one thing. Mom, please treat me as an employee, not as your daughter, at the company.
Of course, I'm the president, after all. I can't show everyone my parental side.
My relief at my mother's response was short-lived.
But
She began to say something. But what? I had a bad feeling about it. Whether she knew how I felt or not, my mother said.
if someone bullies you, make sure to tell me, okay? Then I'll go and take care of them.
At my mother's familiar phrase, I sighed, I knew it. Then, I gave my mother the familiar response. Please, it's time to let go a bit.